Stranger Things taps into our love for nostalgia. The bikes, the music, the hair, the nods to the classic films. But despite this, it was still careful not to perpetuate the myth of the good old days. Because while the kids of Hawkins were fighting monsters from the upside down, Karen Wheeler and Joyce Byers were fighting the roles women were expected to play, and the ones they were never allowed to. They were both navigating impossible expectations, both were constantly underestimated, and they both ended up becoming two of the biggest unsung heroes in the entire series, even if they didn't always get the credit for it. Joyce Byers and Karen Wheeler weren't just side characters, they were the ones holding everything together. So in this video, I want to look at their character arcs, their quiet moments that echoed the loudest, and whether these queens actually got the happy endings they deserved. Because just like nostalgia itself, their final smiles might look warm on the surface, but there's something darker underneath. So let's talk about what their smiles don't show. Joyce Byers is judged from the moment we meet her. She's a divorced, working-class, single mum in a town that quietly decides what that must mean about her. In the 1980s, divorce wasn't just uncommon, it was seen as some kind of moral failing, especially when there were kids involved. And even though Lonnie had an affair and left her, completely abandoning his kids, it was Joyce who was carrying the stigma everywhere she went. She worked long hours, she was doing everything she could to be financially sustainable, and doing the best job she could in raising her boys. So when Will goes missing, Joyce isn't just terrified of the worst case scenario, she's terrified of the judgment, not just from the town, but also from herself. And we see this from when she calls Karen to ask if Will slept there. She can't bring herself to admit he's missing. She hesitates and then just shrugs it off.
I think he just left early for school. Thank you so much.
But later, we just learn that, in reality, she's been blaming herself for the whole situation, for not checking on Will when she got home from work. But to be fair to Joyce, she just got back from a shift, she was tired and probably wanted a bit of time to herself. And Will, he wasn't exactly a young kid, he was more than capable of putting himself to bed. Yet despite that, she still blamed herself. And that shame is exactly why she couldn't tell Karen the truth. Because Joyce knows how much mums judge each other. Because let's face it, the patriarchy did a great job at getting women to hold other women accountable to impossible standards. But when he still doesn't show, Joyce, fearing the worst, with no other option, went to the police station. And what happened? She was dismissed, seen as irrational, emotional, and dare I say it, even hysterical. And I mean, come on, it was Hopper's literal job to take her seriously, and he couldn't even be bothered because he hadn't had his morning coffee.
Coffee and contemplation.
So what does she do? Well, she turns the dial up and won't take no for an answer, because Joyce knew that staying calm and waiting for permission just wasn't a luxury that she could have. Because underneath her sometimes reckless behaviour, she does have good instincts and she knows when something is wrong. She was also the first person who learnt to communicate with Will. Everyone thought she was going crazy, but she knew it was him, and she didn't stop trying to find him. And when all the men in uniform turned up saying they found Will's body, she fought back, even though it made her sound insane. She kept fighting, pushing for the truth, because she knew the alternative is doing nothing, and that just wasn't an option. And well, Joyce isn't always the most patient of characters. And yes, this urgency does make her reckless at times. She risked Eleven's safety to find Will. She heats Will's body up when he's possessed by the Mind Flayer, and when everyone is begging her to stop, she just cranks up the heat. Because Joyce, despite being scared, is not afraid of making the tough choices, and that combination makes her unstoppable. Her toughness is often overlooked because it doesn't look like the strength we're used to seeing. Joyce doesn't flex her muscles and get into fistfights. She doesn't dominate a room. But she would turn a dial, close a gate, and sacrifice the man she loved if it meant saving her son. And she would live with that choice. We can see from her brief interaction with Lonnie that it was not a good marriage. And Hopper, well, he also had his faults. But Bob, he treated Joyce like how she deserved to be treated. He loved her for everything that she was, and she loved him back. But even he was taken from her too soon. It understandably shattered her, yet she still just picked herself up and moved her kids out of Hawkins to try and give them a fresh start away from the upside down, from all the trauma. Everything that Joyce went through would be enough to crush most people, yet she just keeps getting back up, she keeps fighting. Now, Joyce does do her best as a parent, but like all parents, she isn't perfect. With Will, she can be overbearing, overprotective. She doesn't always trust him. And then with Jonathan, she's kind of the opposite. Jonathan is forced into adulthood far too early. In season 1, he acts as a parent while Joyce works long hours, which is why he wasn't present when Will went missing. Now, knowing Jonathan, he was probably just smoking somewhere, but she didn't know that, especially since she was so oblivious to him smoking and getting stoned all the time. She did have a blind spot when it came to Jonathan. She didn't see the weight he was carrying.
I know I haven't been there for you. I've been working so hard and
despite not showing it, he needed his mum too. But to be fair to Joyce, she came close to losing Will time and time again, and that made her cling tight. Yes, albeit a little too tight, and she ended up stifling him. However, when he eventually pushed back after a pep talk from Robin, she listened, and even though it didn't come easy to her, she heard him and supported his decision, and he ended up becoming the sorcerer. And that's Joyce, a mother doing everything she can, even when she gets it wrong. A woman judged for not fulfilling the role society demanded of her. A woman dismissed until she's proven right time and time again. But before we discuss Joyce's happy ending, we need to talk about the woman who looks like her opposite, but is still living with the same pressures. Now, if Joyce Byers is the mother Hawkins loves to judge, well then Karen Wheeler is the mother Hawkins loves to idolise. She's the suburban housewife who supposedly has it all. The picture-perfect life, nice home, 3 kids, successful husband, great hair. She has the privilege, stability and the social circle that Joyce just didn't have access to. Yet it doesn't take long to realise that beneath that polished exterior is a quiet dissatisfaction. She's surrounded by family but completely lonely. Because in that time, women couldn't say how they were really feeling, that they were struggling for fear of being judged. The reality of a perfect marriage is a successful husband that is physically present but emotionally vacant, who is either reading the paper or watching the television while Karen runs the entire household. She's continuously putting her own wants to the side, is overwhelmed and exhausted by constantly performing the role of the perfect mother, because that is what the era demanded. Her longing for something more surfaces more clearly in her attraction to Billy. It's not really about Billy at all, it's about being seen. Karen feels invisible and underappreciated. So when someone finally looks at her and sees her, not just a housemaid, she understandably enjoys the attention. But when the moment finally comes, Karen chooses her family. Okay, not Ted, but her kids. Not because of the lack of desire, but because she understands the cost of leaving. But there was always an underestimated force underneath Karen's polished exterior. She's sharper than people give her credit for, like the way she just casually picks the lock to Nancy's room. She has instinct, she understands danger. Karen and Joyce clearly didn't hang out in the same social circles, despite their sons being so close. Yet, despite Joyce worrying about being judged by Karen, Karen does go to see Joyce when she learns that Will is missing, and she listens. Because with Karen, just like Joyce, their kids always come first, without hesitation. Holly especially trusts her completely. Karen is the only person Holly tells that Mr. Watson is actually Henry. Karen is a safe person, the one who listens, the one who notices. So no wonder that when her children start to become more independent, the emptiness becomes harder to ignore.
You're ridiculous.
You don't even know how old he is!
Karen turns to wine, a detail that's historically accurate and deeply telling. In the 80s, housewives were often medicated or drinking just to cope with lives that gave them no space to exist as people. But strange things are something brilliant, it turns that wine into a symbol. When the Demogorgons come for Holly, Karen does everything she can to hide her daughter. And when she runs out of options, she smashes the bottle and, well, she goes pretty feral. She fought with everything she had just to keep her daughter safe. Then later in the hospital, she used her entire strength, whilst Ted just, chilled in his coma, to fight with everything she had to give the kids a fighting chance. And this time the Duffer Brothers went for the washing machine. Yep, subtle as a brick, boys. But this fight was important at multiple levels. This wasn't just fighting to protect her kids, because they weren't in the basement at the hospital. Yes, she absolutely wanted to protect Lucas and Max, but this was about rage, about a woman who had been swallowing her unhappiness for years, finally getting something to hit back. On the face of it, Karen Wheeler looks like she has everything, and when it comes to her kids, she really does. Karen in earlier seasons often appears more distant from her children, especially when compared to Joyce's intensity. But as the series goes on, it becomes clear that Karen's distance isn't indifference or lack of connection, it's trust. In the earlier seasons, Karen doesn't always know how to reach her children emotionally, but she consistently believes in their judgment. When Nancy's lies unravel following the police interview, and she admits she slept with Steve, Karen doesn't shame her, she's upset about the dishonesty, and that Nancy isn't being open with her. But she doesn't punish Nancy. She listens, she accepts it. She trusts Nancy's ability to navigate her own life. Nancy thinks her mom won't understand, not realising that Karen understands better than anyone.
You can talk to me, whatever happened.
And again we see this with Mike. When Holly's in danger and Karen instinctively wants to follow him, despite being on death's door, Mike stops her, he looks at her and calmly tells her to stay. He tells her they brought Will home and he knows what he's doing. And Karen listens, she trusts him, she lets him go. Karen loves her kids fiercely, but that doesn't mean she's happy. Her life is a quiet tragedy, a woman who did everything she was told, only to realise that wasn't the answer to becoming happy. And yet she still finds ways of pushing back against expectations, and that usually is through her kids. Like this incredible scene with Nancy, where she encourages her to follow the story, to chase the truth, to take risks, to avoid the mistakes that Karen made. Stranger Things never tried to romanticize Karen's life. It instead showed us how suffocating the role of the housewife could be, how much strength it took to survive it, and how much of yourself you could lose along the way. And this is where something really beautiful and honestly really tragic comes into focus. Because for all of their differences, for all of the ways they parent, protect, or let go, both Joyce Byers and Karen Wheeler end up becoming the unsung heroes of Stranger Things. Not just because of the monsters they fight, but because of the children they raise and the generational patterns that they quietly break along the way. Neither Joyce nor Karen is framed as a main character. They don't have superpowers, they're not teenage heroes with guns or slingshots. But when it matters, they always step forward. Karen's heroism is easy to overlook because it may be limited to a couple of significant acts. But she does something even harder. She breaks the cycle of silence and self-sacrifice she was raised in, and she gives her children something she never had, and that was permission to choose their own lives. Joyce's heroism is, well, a little more chaotic, but no less powerful. Joyce, who suffers more knockbacks than most, never stops getting back up, never stops trying, and never stops fighting. Which is one of the reasons it was so hard for her to stand back and let Will breathe. And when he was rendered unconscious and Vecna came out, she still walked straight towards him, knowing that there was even a chance, no matter how small, to save her son. She was going to take it. It's why it was so poetic that Joyce was the one to end Vecna. For years, she watched that creature torment Will while she was dismissed, mocked, and ignored. Every blow is personal, not just for Will, but for everyone standing there watching on. Joyce took on that savagery, so the others didn't have to. Shooting and burning is one thing, but those finishing blows whilst he was impelled, well, that could have had a lasting effect on anyone. But Joyce was making sure as hell that there was no coming back for Vecna. Because after all, previously, the monsters have kept coming. We're on season 5 after all. But perhaps the most profound way Joyce breaks the cycle isn't through violence. Like Karen, it's through encouraging their children to want more, to be brave, compassionate, happy. Both Joyce and Karen come from worlds that taught women to endure and children to stay quiet. But their children don't. Their children push back against who society tells them to be. And that is the legacy that they leave behind. And after everything these women have survived, the monsters, the judgment, the emotional labour no one sees, Stranger Things gives us the final scene where the sun is shining, graduation is in full swing, and on the surface, it is a happy ending. But for Joyce and Karen, when you look closer, it becomes something far more complicated. Karen is dressed to the nines, her family gathered around her. Her appearance mirrors her character arc. As she became braver throughout the season, she stepped more out of the shadows, reclaiming pieces of the woman she used to be. In the finale, she proudly displays her scar across her neck, and her new look mirrors Nancy's. It's a visual acknowledgement of how alike they are, and how much mutual respect now exists between them. Mike almost lost himself, let the events of the seasons consume him, but he found his way back. The Wheeler kids are okay. And look, Ted is also okay after sleeping through all of the drama. How perfectly Ted Wheeler of him. But Karen is still stuck. She's still in her suffocating marriage. And what is her final line? The lasagna is getting cold. It's the reminder that while her children get to grow, explore, and choose their futures, Karen is still trapped in that suburban cage she started in. It's painfully realistic of the times. Women like Karen rarely had the means or the permission to take control of their own lives. Joyce's ending looks brighter. Her boys are safe, happy, flourishing, and she finally gets a date at Enzo's with Hopper. And Hopper, he seems to be trying. He's not letting the loss of Elle consume him. He's looking forward, not back. But Hopper, well, he isn't Bob. Hopper and Joyce may have been the focus, but Bob loved everything about Joyce and treated her like the queen she was. He always put Joyce's needs first, and Hopper, well, he just didn't. He was often heated, jealous. Yes, he did make progress. But after a first marriage, is this one also doomed? I mean, like, look at this scene. Did Hopper ever leave this lasting impression on Joyce? What do you think? Were you Team Hopper or Team Bob? Regardless, she looks happy to be engaged and is excited about the possibility of Montauk, which is a nod to the original Stranger Things concept, yes. But it's also a reminder that fresh starts aren't always clean slates. Joyce has a pattern of toxic relationships and Hopper has a pattern of emotional withdrawal. They're trying to break those patterns, but patterns don't just disappear because the series is ending and everyone is smiling. The ending is hopeful, but it's not simple. Stranger Things isn't interested in ranking mothers. It's not asking who's better, who's stronger, and who's right. But it is asking, why are women like Joyce punished for caring too loudly, while women like Karen are encouraged to suffer quietly? Both women survive, both women save their children, but neither of them get the freedom they deserve. And maybe that is the point. Joyce Byers and Karen Wheeler aren't just side characters. They're the emotional architecture of the show. And their stories remind us that sometimes the bravest thing a woman can do is survive a life that was never built for her. Anyway, what do you think, guys? Do they get the happy ending they deserved? Let me know your thoughts below, and as always, I'll see you next time.